Hey everybody, welcome to Fantasy R&R. This is your host Ryan.
And I'm Rob.
And this is week 5 of Fantasy Football 2022.
This is Fantasy with Rob and Ryan, Fantasy R&R.
Instead of our normal format where we do a quick preview of all the games of the week, this time we're going to do kind of a year in review where we're going to go back to our breakout candidate podcast and talk about the players we brought up. We're going to see if they panned out, if they've been below expectations, and what we do with them going forward. Let's get started with Rob's quarterback pick, Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars, our hometown boy.
I'm liking what I see out of T-Law so far. Last game was horrendous, of course. The elements would have everything to do with that, and a pretty solid Eagles defense. Going forward, I think T-Law's going to be just fine. I think in the podcast I said he'd be like a top 8 quarterback off the top of my head, and I'm going to stick with that going forward this year.
My pick was Tua Tagovailoa of the Miami Dolphins. We wanted to see more out of him last season, so this season I really thought with adding weapons like Tyreek Hill, the emergence of Jalen Waddle, there was really going to be a good platform for Tua Tagovailoa to take a giant step forward. There's a huge scandal going on with the way he got concussed in the previous game and then this last game at Cincinnati. He did have a 6-touchdown game this year with 469 yards. We thought maybe this is a Tua we're all waiting for. Buffalo, I think we all expect him to come back down to earth, 186, 1 TD. He had that obvious concussion in the middle of that game, and they decided not to fully pull him out for the rest of the game. Now we don't know what's going on going forward. There's calls for him to retire. There's people saying he should sit out the rest of the season. I think Tua was about to break out, and he had 8 TDs in the air, 3 interceptions up until this point in the season. He was a top 10 quarterback, even with missing all that time from the game at Cincinnati. So I think going forward, you find a backup plan ASAP. Kirk Cousins, Carson Wentz. You may have to settle for guys like Geno Smith or Jimmy Garoppolo, but you have to get on the waiver wire now or consider trading one of your superstars to get a quarterback. So let's move on now to the running backs we were talking about. Let's see how these guys panned out. It's a little disappointing to look at this list. Rob, you had Cam Akers.
Cam Akers, more like Scam Akers. SportsCenter just reported that. His new name's Scam Akers. He looks terrible. The Rams' offense looks anemic. Stafford looks like shit. You can't trust anybody in this backfield. This is something we've talked about a couple times this year, very similar to that of Buffalo's situation. Right now, San Francisco does have their guy just due to injuries, but I don't know what Cam Akers is doing. I'm not giving up on him just yet. I probably would love to see one more full season. If this is going forward at the end of the season, I think Cam Akers is easily cuttable. But he is firmly entrenched on my bench for right now. But I am hoping for the best with Scam Akers.
Yeah, hopefully you didn't make a Cam mistakers like we did. Next guy that we made a mistake with up until this point, Chase Edmonds hasn't really been the high-volume running back I expected him to be coming into this year. I thought he was going to be a huge PPR play. Maybe not a ton of rushing attempts. I mean, I do admit that, but I did think he was going to get like 10 targets a game for like some swing-out routes and stuff with Tua on the team. They can't throw deep to Tyreek every single play. But, I mean, the only time that Chase Edmonds has really looked good are the days I have not played him. So he's got a couple of little vulture TDs here and there, but again, not a lot of volume, not a lot of yards. I would temper your expectations. He's now a flex 2 play at most. I don't get rid of him. I don't think he has much trade value. But, playing him every week as an RB1 or 2 is going to be expecting a little bit too much. So this is going to be an interesting thing to talk about. Rob, this guy was involved in a trade you and me made this season pretty recently.
Mm-hmm.
This was one of your breakout wide receivers of the year. Who is it?
Michael Pittman Jr. I still love the guy. I just wanted a piece of the old Travis Etienne. I wanted a Jaguar on my team, so I was willing to do it. He looks fine. He's just handicapped yet again by the person who's throwing to him. The last 2 years has been abysmal, and it's not Michael Pittman's fault. It's the fact that the Colts are the cheapest team when it comes to quarterbacks. Carson Wentz, this year with Matt Ryan, and both of them need to kick rocks at this point. you're not benching Michael Pittman, and it's not going to happen. Continue playing Michael Pittman Jr. going forward.
My pick was Rashad Bateman, second-year player on the Baltimore Ravens. We're running into some problems here pretty early in the season. We're about a quarter of the way into the season. Rashad Bateman is only the 30th ranked wide receiver, so he's still obviously, a top play, but not the best. He started off the season hot, 59 yards with 2 receptions, a TD, got about 14 points in our half PPR league. Next week in Baltimore against Miami, he had 7 targets, turned that into 108 yards and a TD, absolutely went off. These last few games, he's been quiet, and now he's not practicing this week much. And that's a little scary because we already know that Mark Andrews gets the share of the targets there in Baltimore. And if Rashad Bateman misses a little bit, and there's more chemistry to grow with J.K. Dobbins being back, being eased in, Gus Edwards is about to return, and we got Devin Duvernay, who's been looking pretty solid all season. Rashad Bateman may not come back to a wide receiver 1 role. I still think he's 100% rosterable, so I disagree with people who aren't rostering him in leagues, but I think he's going to be on your bench more often than not. However, you will see 20-point games going forward from him here and there. Remember what I said when I called his breakout? I didn't think he was going to be a top 5 wide receiver. I just think that you're probably good for 900 yards and 6 TDs, which he's totally on pace for. Another wide receiver, Rob, you talked about, a guy I've really liked, it's been a huge disappointment. You were pretty high on Justin Fields in that podcast. I feel like maybe you're changing your mind here, but how do you feel about the wide receiver, Darnell Mooney?
I'll make it quick, simple, and easy. I would not roster a single bear on my team, period, not named Khalil Herbert at this point. I don't know if David Montgomery is going to be healthy going forward. Justin Fields, I think, is one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL right now. As we were talking about earlier, I think you said this, Ryan. This isn't going to be like, hey, let's see this one more year. No, Justin Fields sucks. That team is horrible. I think the Chicago Bears are going to go down as probably bottom 3 teams this year. Yay or nay, I wouldn't even bother starting Darnell Mooney, and honest to goodness, I probably would dangle him out. It's still a pretty solid name. I would dangle him out and look at trading Darnell Mooney, and if you can't trade him, because I don't know who accepts a trade for him right now, he is once again on the bench going forward.
My second wide receiver, Rondale Moore. This has turned into a sad podcast. It seems like we were wrong more often than we were right, but Rondale Moore, he missed his window in my opinion. He had a couple of weeks there where DeAndre Hopkins was going to be out, where there was some speculation of whether or not Hollywood Brown was going to start the season healthy. Zach Ertz getting a little older. This was Rondale Moore's chance for a sophomore breakout. But, after missing the first 3 games due to a lingering injury, he comes back at Carolina in week 4 on 5 targets, only turned into 11 yards, doesn't have a TD. So on the season so far, the guy has 3 receptions for 11 yards through 4 weeks. I don't expect that to change going forward because it looks like he's getting the same usage as last year. They're just dumping him out on short screens. And now DeAndre Hopkins is on his way back. Marquise Brown is the guy on the Cardinals. Ertz is there. It's going to be hard to really fight for those targets in Arizona. And I think Rondale Moore is going to be the 4th, 5th option at most. He's going to be completely boom or bust, kind of like Christian Kirk was when he was on the team. I would cut ties with Rondale Moore and leave him as a week-to-week waiver pickup. Cole Kmet, your tight end. This is somebody I feel is in the same boat with Darnell Mooney. It's really not for lack of talent. It's because of the situation he's in. Would you cut ties with Cole Kmet and look elsewhere for your tight end, or do you just roll with him because of the tight end landscape?
No, there's got to be somebody better out there at this point. I mean, I would take the likes of Gerald Everett, Evan Ingram. I mean, I did Robert Tonyan. I know those aren't flashy names, but good God, once again, see what I said about Darnell Mooney. That quarterback situation's horrible. The Bears' game plan is horrendous, and the offense is barely on the field. And Justin Fields isn't throwing the freaking ball. Nope, scratch Cole Kmet. I'd cut him. I'd find somebody else. There's got to be somebody else. And the window's probably closed. I mean, if you're sitting there rostering Cole Kmet, or even worse, starting him, and you didn't pick up the likes of any of the tight ends I just named, and then some, there's still plenty I'm spacing on. I mean, come on, man. You got to do something. Trade for somebody. Cole Kmet, you can't start him.
The guy I picked was Hayden Hurst, and listening back to that podcast, he's pretty much right on point to where I thought he would be. He's a little bit more involved in this Cincinnati offense than he was with the Ravens or the Falcons. And to start off the season, he's been averaging about 6 targets a game. He's got over 100 yards on the season. He's 14 receptions, so the guy's on pace for about 55 receptions and 500 yards with maybe 4 or 5 TDs. That would end up being the best season that Hayden Hurst has had, and that's what we were talking about on that podcast, is breaking out as a player, not necessarily as a fantasy star, but Hayden Hurst is now somebody that is kind of falling into that category of tight ends that you can throw into your main tight end slot and roll with every week and just kind of hope that, he puts up a little bit more than 10 points, which Hayden Hurst did this last game against Miami with his touchdown. I think going forward against Baltimore this next week, Hayden Hurst is a must-play. Baltimore is dead last in passing defense this season, and Joe Burrow spreads the ball around very well. A lot of the guys we're talking about, they're boom or bust like that in the first place. So Hayden Hurst has got a great chance to put up more points here in Week 5. I think he's done exactly what we were hoping he would do. I said he would finish maybe a little bit outside of the top 10, but obviously that's a huge jump up for Hayden Hurst. Now at position rank 15 on the year, there's a good chance that Hayden Hurst could actually break that top 10. So hold on to him if you have him. I don't know if you trade for him, depends on what team needs are. Definitely look for him on the waiver wire immediately. I think he's going to finish as one of the top tight ends in the league. Now, this next part's actually really interesting because we decided to add a couple of rookies we thought were going to break out and have an immediate impact for their team and an immediate impact in the fantasy sense this season. You picked Jahan Dotson, your boy from Penn State. What are you feeling at this point in the season with this new injury report? Is he going to be the same Jahan Dotson for the rest of the year that we saw to start it off? And how do you feel about him in a keeper league?
I love Jahan Dotson. He has proved me right. Yes, this hamstring injury, it happens. What, again, is limiting Jahan Dotson the way it was Michael Pittman Jr. is the quarterback. And ironically enough, we're talking about Carson Wentz, who was the quarterback for the Colts with Michael Pittman last year. The Washington football Redskin Commanders need to essentially I said it earlier this year, they just need to let this season be a wash, go get their quarterback next year. And in a keeper league, to make this full circle, you are keeping Jahan Dotson. And I think next year is the year that Jahan Dotson is Jahan Dotson. And I think, again, the Washington football Redskin Commanders are going to have a pretty solid team next year. We talked about this, receiving corps, running back corps. Defense looks pretty good. It's just Dotson. I'm playing Dotson for next year. So I'm starting him when I want to, if I have to. But I am definitely holding on to all my shares of Jahan Dotson going forward, especially in the Dynasty League.
My rookie was Romeo Doubs. He made an immediate splash in the media and in Green Bay because Green Bay had a pretty weak receiving roster to start the year. And he was getting a good rapport with Rodgers in the offseason. And we know that if Rodgers likes you, you're going to get the ball. Now, Doubs has made some mistakes, and Rodgers is critical of him, but he's still trusting him. This point in the season, after a slow start to the first 2 games with Green Bay's bad offense, Romeo Doubs is inside the top 40, and he's a rookie. And the guys around him right now, Brandon Cooks, Jerry Jeudy, Adam Thielen, Michael Pittman Jr., Terry McLaurin, Isaiah McKenzie, Devontae Smith, Rashad Bateman was 30, like I was saying. Obviously, Alan Lazard was hurt to start off the year, but even he is just kind of like the volume, well-known receiver in Green Bay. Doubs looks like he's got the talent vertically to take over the job. He's now projected for over 10 points in ESPN this week. He has a TD in each of the last of his 2 games, so I'm loving Doubs as a hold for the rest of the season in redraft leagues and potentially starting all the time now. And obviously, put him on your keeper teams. See what he does going forward. Our honorable mentions or notable mentions during one of our top 25 draft podcasts, we were talking a little bit about Jonathan Taylor as the number 1 overall pick, whether or not he was worth it. I did not think that he would just immediately come back and have the same level of success he did last year. Now I'm actually starting to get really worried that this is David Johnson 2.0. Where maybe we got one amazing year out of Jonathan Taylor as the top running back in the league and in fantasy, and now this next year he's just going to kind of disappear after injuries and we'll never see from him again. I hope that's not the case, but I will say it is not crazy to get ahead of the Christian McCaffrey curse and trade away Jonathan Taylor, high value. There's going to be somebody that wants to bet he's going to bounce back, and maybe he will. But the whole point is you could get some serious collateral for Jonathan Taylor, maybe a guy who's not an immediate injury risk, and he could be like, game-changing for you, team-changing. Maybe offer up for Justin Jefferson or something like that and see where it goes. Jonathan Taylor is a complete question mark at this point in his career. Now, Josh Allen, Rob, we got to gloat a little bit here. What have we been saying all season about take a quarterback early and take Josh Allen first?
Yes, that's right. Get our guy. Wyoming's own Josh Allen. We said draft him everywhere this year. I mean, you look at the landscape of fantasy players and you look at last year. This is almost on the reverse side of what you're saying about Jonathan Taylor. We both were kind of laughing, thinking to ourselves, you can get the number one fantasy player from last year in Josh Allen in the third round. Does that not sound like a steal? Well, it has been if you've been doing so. You and I have flip-flopped between Josh Allen and Herbert because sometimes Allen went ridiculously early. In one draft, he went first round. Which, are we looking at drafting Josh Allen first round next year? We talked about that too. And I think it might be a viable option going forward. Look how many first rounders haven't scored as many points as Josh Allen has. I mean, it's kind of wild that he's slipping even to the third round. The guy's a stud, absolute stud. The Bills, as we were talking about, are ready to make their run. I feel like it's got to be this year. I keep saying it. They've looked, there's chinks in the armor here and there. But I still think the Bills are the best team in the NFL. I think Josh Allen is the best quarterback in the NFL. Fantasy R&R, for as many of the mistakes that we've made, which, nobody's perfect, and everybody always screws up fantasy stuff, we nailed Josh Allen. And I would love for Josh Allen to nail me.
Some players we just kind of changed our minds on to close out the show here. Rob, you picked Devontae Smith. I guess you weren't high on him at the beginning of the year with my boy Jalen Hurts, who is also going to the Super Bowl with that weak NFC pad. What are you feeling going forward? Because you just traded for this guy.
Yeah, this is to go full circle on our trade. After I got done trading away Pittman Jr. for ETN, your brother Ross was talking about needing a running back. DeAndre Swift was getting injured. Asked me about Tony Pollard. Traded me Devontae Smith. This was after he had that monster game. And after watching Jalen Hurts, and I watch him closely because he's your quarterback, and we're pals, and that's what we do. And I was like, damn, this Eagles offense looks pretty good. See, another sports center. They know the Eagles are good. They're just taking all of our advice. Now they're listening. Hey, I told you they're taking our advice. I like Devontae Smith. I love him and Jalen Hurts back in college. They look like they're connecting very well. A.J. Brown looks really, really good. But don't forget, A.J. Brown is an injury risk. And if he goes down, Devontae Smith's probably the number one guy. But even still, when Brown's on the field, he's getting double covered. So I love it. A guy I'm surprised I didn't bring up, just real quick on a side note, Miles Sanders. Had his big game. Well, interesting to see what they do. But the Eagles do look really good. I mean, I'm all for an Eagles-Bills Super Bowl this year. I would love to see that. And yeah, you got to have a piece of the Eagles offense going forward.
And for me, it's Cooper Kupp. I did not believe that he was going to be worth the high redraft this year. I thought there was no way he could recreate it. Now, him and Justin Jefferson are in that same realm. I think, Cooper Kupp has hit Randy Moss status already. Just tons of targets, tons of yards, tons of TDs. Maybe not necessarily the same type of player, wide receiver as Randy Moss, far from it. But Cooper Kupp, based off of what we've seen with the running backs last year and how I felt about running backs this year, I just see the constant fantasy, the change in the fantasy landscape. Cooper Kupp can be your number one overall pick next year. He could be the next Antonio Brown, where it's like, maybe I want Antonio Brown and not Le'Veon Bell. Cooper Kupp is definitely an option at number one over the flavor of the year running back from the years previous. So next year, I'm not going to be surprised if how this season ends. Maybe next season, I'm looking at Cooper Kupp or Josh Allen as my number one overall pick just to secure myself points throughout the season. We'll see how it goes, but again, some right, some wrong. Suck a fucking dong. This was Fantasy R&R with Rob and Ryan. We will see you next time.
I love TDs.